Hello again. Today's episode will be brought to you by the letter D, and D is for dragons, of course. Let's get started on our dragon door knocker. And here is my concept drawing for the door knocker. This is fairly close to the size that I want it, but it may not be exact. I'm not going to get too hung up on the exact dimensions of the drawing. This is just a concept and gives me an idea where I want to go and what I want the shapes to look like. Presently, from the tip of his tail to the top of his horns is about 10 inches. And we'll see if that ends up being correct. It is drawn at 3/4 across his neck and right about here, which is in keeping with the size of the bar that we have to work with. Now, if something like this has to fit a specific location and the size matters, you do need to work off a scale drawing. For this door knocker, it's more of an artistic piece. It's more of just a challenge to make the door knocker itself, and it's not about fitting specific sizes. As I do this, I might decide that a bend or a curve looks a little bit better done differently, and I'm just going to go with that, or go with what the material seems to want to do if it's appropriate. Now, I would like to do this as a series of 3 videos, one to do the dragon's head, and perhaps get the shape of the door knocker, the handle part itself done, and then another one to do the back plate and the mounting bracket, and a third one to do all the assembly. But I don't know for sure if we'll get the dragon done in one reasonable length video, and I certainly don't think we want to go to an hour. So if it's going to take longer than about 35 or 40 minutes, I'm going to split that. We'll do 2 videos on forging the dragon and the door knocker handle itself, which is just all of this part that you can see in the drawing. I think that there will be a lot of this that is not explained in great detail just to be able to get it done more efficiently. This is less of a tutorial and a how-to video as much as it is a documentary of how I'm going to do this collaboration with the wrought iron that Roy from Christ-Centered Ironworks sent me. There should be plenty to learn, and I'll try to explain most of it, but I may not show every heat, every step, just because it's liable to go on to about a 5 or 6 hour video. I think this is going to end up taking me several days worth of work to finish the entire project and to do it right. I'm going to take my time, I'm going to slow down, I'm going to be careful, so I'm going to get a toothpick and hold that between my lips to remind me to slow down. Speaking of toothpicks, that was the last video we did about why this might help. Amazingly, it is the most disliked video I've ever had. I was really quite surprised. Oh well, even thumbs downs are actually a positive thing for the channel because it shows viewer interaction, and YouTube likes that. So for everybody that gave it a thumbs down, thanks, I appreciate it. But seriously, let's get on to our project. We're going to start by working the horns. I'm going to draw some of this out, and I'm going to split the horns. There are other ways you can achieve horns, and I may try to show that. Or we may just do a third dragon at some point, just to show alternatives for horns, ears, things like that. But I'll draw this out, I'll split it just like you would a fork. And then I'm going to double it back on itself and forge weld it so that the horns are pointing backwards. Ultimately, I want the horns to curl forward on the dragon so that when you lift the door knocker, you don't end up digging the horns into your door. If you put little short horns on, that's not such a problem. But if you have long horns, you're liable to nail your dragon's horns into the door every time you try to knock with the knocker, and that's no fun. Since we had a ½ inch of rain the other night, that's a wonderful thing around here, actually dampened down the 105+ acre wildfire that's about 40 miles from here, and people are actually starting to get to go home now, so a little bit of rain was a wonderful thing. But anyway, since we had some rain, the fire danger isn't quite as extreme as it was. I feel comfortable using the coal fire today. It may be the only time we use it for this project, but that way I am more guaranteed to get a good weld when I double this back and make that weld. After that, nothing really needs to be at welding temperature, unless something starts to delaminate. Well, we got the fire lit, we got our bar of wrought iron. Let's get started. I want to take about the last inch of the bar and draw it out to about 3 inches, and then kind of see what I've got for the horns. I keep forging in square cross sections, so one blow each side, turn 90 degrees, and another blow, and that helps keep the wrought iron from coming apart. Working at welding heat. So now I'm just straightening. We'll go back to the fire. That's a pretty good start for the horns. Go ahead and create a little shoulder here. So this is the part that will become horns. I'm going to go ahead and split that. I'm going to start my layout cold so I don't go too deep too fast, and that gives me a chance to really check my alignment with the chisel. This is not one of the chisels we made. This is a H13 hot chisel that a lot of the different blacksmith suppliers sell. All I want to do is establish a line that splits the horns evenly. If we need to come back later and file one down further, we will. They don't typically work all the way out here over the tail of the anvil like this, but I figured it was a better camera view. And wrought iron splits very nicely. And so I'm a little off, so I'm going to angle my chisel and try and keep the mass the same. Next we'll go to the vise and finish the split from the end. I'll just straight down the split here. Level that off nicely. Now these are fairly ragged, so I'm going to take a half round file. Just like if we were working a fork for cooking, I want to round the horns up. So I'll take them to an octagon shape. I'll start rounding them. I may do some more filing on these as we get closer to finished, just to clean them up. There will be more to be done on them. I just want to get them well underway now. And I notice that I've got a place that wants to come apart right at the base. So I'm going to get in there real quick with a file before I heat this back up again. So that's been cleaned up, and that little bit of delamination is gone. It can't propagate into a bigger problem now, we hope. We'll never know till we're done, but there's always a chance of breaking off the horns if we don't take care of that. So take care of those little problems as soon as you see them. Now the next thing to do, I'm going to bring the horns back together a little bit, because I don't need them sticking out to the side right now. I need them out of my way. And then I'm going to bend this in half, and we're going to forge weld it. There'll be a lot more work done on these horns later. I just want to establish the fact that there will be horns now, and then get this forge weld, because the high heat from the forge weld is bound to mess with the horns a little bit. Now, which way do we want to bend this? If I bend it this way, we end up with a more prominent brow, and the horns come out from the back of the head more. If I bend it this way, the horns come out from the top of the head more. And I think I want the horns at the top. I'm going to bend a little bit more than an inch. I'm going to be drawing out his snout, so this is going to get longer. And we just broke a horn off. Well, that stinks. Well, that didn't even break off where we had the previous line that looked like it might break. But I can see the other horn is about to do the same thing. So clearly there isn't enough strength in this wrought iron to do that, which surprises me because it's been pretty good wrought iron. It's behaved pretty well right up to that point. So what do? We can either go back and try it again, but I suspect that the same thing will happen again. And what exactly caused that, I can't tell you. It looks pretty grainy, so it's just couldn't take being reduced that much or something. But I don't see any signs of a cold shut or a nick. We got all that filed out, so these will probably become nails to hold the thing on. And I think we're going to go to Plan B for horns, which you probably wanted to see anyway. So that's one way to do it. And working in mild steel, I don't think those would have broken off. I've done that plenty of times with ram's heads and other things that I really think we would have pulled that off just fine. But now we're going to show you the other way of doing horns, and that will come much later in the process. For now, we're just going to worry about getting this folded over and welded and create the mass for the head. I'm actually going to go ahead and straighten this out, and I'm going to put a scarf on the very end of the bar. This will actually result in a better weld, and I'll be happier with that anyways. It'll just make the horns a little bit more difficult to achieve. It gives me something I can blend in for my weld, which I did not have with the previous attempt. Now, the easiest way to bend this would be to cut it in half, or halfway through, I should say. But if we do that, we end up with end grain on both sides that'll be at the end of his nose, and I don't want that. I want side grain. So I'm going to bend this, even though it doesn't bend as easily in the big section. And that should eliminate that bit of the problem. So we're at a good high heat. Now I'm going to full around at the edge of the anvil to create a place where it wants to bend. But that's not the same as cutting in because I don't sever any of the grain that way. And I'm going to go ahead and put some flux on this. Helps if you open the little nozzle. And we're going to go back in the fire and get a really nice high welding heat. Wrought iron welds much hotter than mild steel. Remember, light quick blows. Start at the end and work all that flux out. Then we'll deal with the scarf. And that gives mass for his head. I'm going to take another heat just to be absolutely sure that that's welded. It felt real good. That's one of the advantages of wrought iron. You get it that hot, it welds really easy. And I'll put a little more flux on just to be sure. Now this is the part that'll be his snout. This will be his brow and his eyes in here. And then we'll get the horns out of this edge right here eventually. Make sure that scarf is really welded well. I can start drawing out his snout, or his nose. But again, you want to keep this hot. So I'm going to go back to a lower end of welding heat. Speaking of welding heat, wrought iron is where we get that lemon yellow welding heat people talk about. Mild steel doesn't need it that hot, but wrought iron, lemon yellow is a good heat. Now on our test dragon, I think his snout ended up a little bit blocky. So on this one I want to take it down just a little bit more. I'm going to start refining some of the edges. It'll be the sides of his nose and up towards his eye sockets. You can see how that's starting to take shape into kind of a head. I need a glove on my right hand here pretty soon. That's fairly good and hot. I'm going to round up his neck a little bit. I just think it'll look better in the long run. And it's looking pretty good for the nose, I think. It'll get refined much further with the tools. The more you can do at the anvil, though, the less you'll have to do with all the figure carving tools, and it'll go a little bit quicker. But the more risk you have of messing something up. So that's our start right there. Now before I do any more on the head, I don't want to take too great a risk of messing up any detail work. So I want to turn him around, and I'm going to start drawing out the part that'll be the body slash tail and door knocker part. And I want to get this from tip of his nose to the tip of his tail about 14 inches. So I need to draw some of this out in here. I want to go to about a 1/2 inch square bar, and I am hoping to have some material left to make my mounting bracket. Now this needs a hole for a pivot point, which will go right about here, so I don't want to start drawing out until I get beyond that hole. I need to leave that part square. Also pays to keep it straight. Now we're getting close. And we're certainly gaining some length here. I think we're going to have enough for the dragon. I don't know if we're going to have enough for the little mounting piece or not. But I have a backup plan if we don't. I'm leaving this end heavy because when I get there I want to make a spear point to the end of his tail. So we're getting very close here. Now on my drawing, the tip of the snout to the tip of the tail is 15 inches. So I'm going to mark that on my anvil. And that way we can compare when we get close, which we're probably pretty close. But I'd rather have it a little long than a little short. Now we're pretty much there, but I still don't know that I'm going to have enough for the other piece I want. But we're going to find out. I'll draw a little bit more out through this area and then see if I can cut that off and save some for some of the other parts I wanted to make. I'm going to go ahead and go up here to the face of the anvil and kind of create a little shoulder. And see if that's where I want my spear point tail to start. And if I do, then I can cut this off and save that blobby end there for another purpose. I need just a little more length, I think. Let's take just a little bit more. I can also get a little bit more out of this tail. He's a little heavy up in here still, but I don't want it much thinner down here. It starts to look kind of spindly and funny looking if you get it too thin, I think. I think that's going to work though. I think there's just enough there that this piece will turn into the little boss or strike plate portion of the thing that his tail will hammer on. So that'll be more or less just a little bolt. Since this is still attached, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. It's easier to hold on to now. And it's more or less just a big square-headed rivet. So I'll create the rivet shank here with a butcher tool. It's a little out of order, but it's easy to do at this point, so I'm just going to get it done. I'm just going to go ahead and weld this at welding heat, or shape this at welding heat, I should say, to keep the end together. It's really way more material than I need for this. Always happens when you draw out a tenon though. So instead of messing with that too much, let's just cut the junk off of here. In the long run, I only need this to be about 3/8 of an inch long. Then I'm going to go to octagon and round. And I'll cut that off, and that'll make our little square rivet that'll be our tab, or our striker, or whatever you want to call it. The advantage of cutting this off in a guillotine tool like this is that I can end up with a nice straight cut on the piece that I'm cutting off, and a point where I want to point on his tail. So I kind of kill two birds with one stone here. So this ends up a little bit pointed. We're going to continue to work this, and in the side profile I want this the same thickness as his tail. But in the vertical profile I want it to be a big spear point. And this may get some filing. There's a point of ridiculousness if this is too big here. Although, pretty much I like that. I'm going to want it flat for the strike surface. So that's the general idea there for his tail. So the question is, round or square? I think I'm going to round it up. I think it'll look better round, right up to the point where I'm going to have that section that the hole goes through. Here again we want to keep it hot, and wrought iron really wants you to stick with the plan here. That means square, then octagon, which is where we're going now, and then round. If you get it off into some odd shape, you start shearing the fibers across each other, and it's more likely to fall apart. I'm going to round up right here first, where I can be really careful. Then I'll worry about working further up the tail. Remember, I don't want to go up here to this square section. Once you're at octagon, then you can start rounding up. Refine this transition a little bit. Now, working this colder at this point helps smooth it and leave it scale free, but you're doing very little forging. This is just cleaning up, straightening, and knocking off scale. I also noticed that his tail is no longer in line. I've put a twist in it somewhere. He's almost 90 degrees off now. But it will be easy to twist it back. So I just took that to the vise real quick and gave it a quarter twist. That's really all we need to do to that end for now anyways. We'll see if it needs anything else later. So now it's time to move back up the dragon, and I think the next thing I want to do is punch this hole. I put a nice deep center punch mark in both sides opposite of each other, so I can work from both sides and hopefully end up with a very even, very straight hole punched here. When you punch, the material bulges out on the side the punch is going through, and I want it to bulge out evenly left and right. Otherwise I just punch through all the way from one side. If everything's going right, this should punch right through this time. Well, it's close. I was hoping to not have to go over the Pritchel hole, but ooh, gotta get it hot again. I'm starting to see some cracking. That may be fatal cracking right in here. I may have to actually weld that up before we can finish this. That's really too bad. Well, that's real disappointing to see those cracks forming. I suspect that I'm going to have to repair that with the torch. I can't think of any way to forge weld that. Next thing I want to do, though, and hopefully it holds together, I want to push this bulge all off to one side so it pivots from the back of the dragon and not in the center, and that just, I'm hoping, gives me better clearance and better pivoting action to have that round bulge. So I'm going to put a drift in, I'm going to put it in a swedge, and I'm going to forge it down into the swedge. So again, working at a very high heat. Of course, it's cooling off quickly. That establishes what I want there. And I can also see that my hole didn't go straight through, so I'm going to have to clean that up with a drill bit. So this is all part of the learning process when you're doing something that you're not intimately familiar with. Now this crack would probably stay together. It's deep, but it's going to be low stress. But I think I'll still, when we're done for the day, I'm going to go ahead and take the torch and weld that up a little bit. A TIG welder would work just fine. But I think it's time to go on and work on a head. Now, just like our previous dragon, I'm going to start by just defining certain parts of his face here. I want to set in for the bridge of his nose and the eye sockets with a set tool. And as always, I'll apologize if my hand's in the way of seeing exactly what's going on. Without a separate person just to run the camera, it's hard to tell where I'm in the way and where I am not in the way. Then we'll get that hot again. I don't want step marks down here at his nose, so I'm blending all that as I go. I just want the big step at his eyes. I think that's pretty good at the moment. Let's see what we've got. Going to need a little bit of straightening. And I think I'm going to try and knock off the edge. I'm getting a little sharp corner that I don't think looks right. But I like where his eyes are going there. Now, a lot of the back of his head will eventually get chiseled into horns if our horn idea works. Well, I went to turn the camera off after the last step, and I don't think I actually filmed it. So I had used the center punch to establish a point for the eyes, and then a ball-end punch to start establishing the eye sockets. I'm going to refine the eyes just a little bit more with the ball punch and try and push them up towards the top of his head. I also notice his head's a little twisted. I'm going to grab him with a twisting wrench if I can. And get his snout back pointed the way it ought to be. I'm going to use this oval set, kind of bring the bottoms of his eye sockets and blend them in down with the bridge of his nose. Now it's going to be time to pick an eyeball punch. Got several round punches here. That one fits pretty good. It's probably the one we'll go with. That one's way too big. Okay, so we're going to go with this eye punch. So I want to drive the eyes as straight in as I can. That'll continue to spread the top of his eyebrows and the sides, make his face bigger. By working evenly, this doesn't get as deformed. I think one more heat and we'll have that. I'm starting to get just a little bit of cracking in the wrought iron again, right at the top of his eye, so that's going to be the limit of what we do there. Let me find my center punch again, and we'll put pupils in. I think that's all we need to do to the eyes for now. So you can really see the dragon taking shape at this point. But right there's a little crack, and right there's a little crack. So going any deeper would just be a recipe for disaster, I think. So the next step on this dragon is going to be to work at his nose, a beard, and a mouth. But I think we're running out of time for today, so I think that's where we're going to call it quits for today. So this will at least go to 4 videos at this point. Well, I think this is a good place to pause for the day. We got most of the profile of the head is done. We know pretty much what he's going to look like. We got the eyes done. We've had a few problems. We broke the horns off. I cracked the back of this. I'm getting a little cracking at the eyes, but I'm actually okay with that. That's going to be a little bit of character and just shows that it was made out of wrought iron. It won't affect the final product, I don't think. Now, if a big piece falls off, it might be different. But the camera battery is getting low. Everything I brought to drink is pretty much empty. So I'm thirsty, I'm hot, I'm tired. I think I'm going to call it a day here. But it's also a good chance for me to let this cool and really examine it. Where are we going with it? What do I think I want to do? Well, I know that behind his head, I think I'm going to chisel and try and raise horns. That's what I'm thinking today. Tomorrow I might be thinking something different. I'm not sure if I'm going to put ears in, but I might put some ears in. This wouldn't be a bad time to do it. They go in very similar to the eyes, and then they're chiseled and raised up. And that might be worth doing, although I don't know if dragons really should have ears. They're kind of a reptile, and most reptiles don't really have prominent ears that stick up like a dog or a bear or a deer or something like that. They have ears that don't have flaps on the outside. But sometimes that looks good, so maybe I'll do it. The dragon on my little cup has some ears, little puppy dog ears. So horns, ears. I definitely want to make a prominent mouth, and this one I definitely want to put a tongue in. The only risk will be when we chisel the mouth that it breaks in two pieces, and if we're too close to the forge weld that we did, we could break it completely open. So we're going to have to be careful about that, but we should be able to do it. There have been dragons made out of wrought iron before. Just because I haven't done it doesn't mean it can't be done. But clearly there is a learning curve with wrought iron. It's not just a perfect substitute for mild steel. It is easier to forge. It forge welds much better because you can get it at a higher heat, but it has problems with the grain structure, and that's what causes the cracks. It's like working a piece of wood too thin or working in the wrong direction with the grain. It's going to split, it's going to cause problems. And that's something that if I'm going to do this all the time, I just have to learn to work with the material better. And I think that's really what all this comes down to. It's not so much a flaw in the material as a lack of experience on my part, but I think we're still going to get a nice door knocker out of it. We got a nice pivot point. I've already welded that up with a torch. I'll do a little filing to clean the weld up. And in the long run, it's going to have a little bracket over it, so you will not see that. So anyways, that's my thoughts for the day. I think we're going to end up with at least 4 parts now. But a lot of this I'm very happy with. I think it's going to be just what we're after. And we will pick it up again tomorrow with a nose and a beard and a mouth, and hopefully get through the tongue and some ears and horns and all that kind of stuff, and get this piece finished, and then we can get on to the back plate and assembly in the last video or 2 or 3 or however many it takes. And I think I'm going to have some extra material from the back plate, and that's where I'm going to get my little mounting tabs. If you remember the original drawing, there's some little tabs right here that will have a rivet through, and that's what it will pivot on right through here. And I think there's enough extra material here that I can just cut part of this off and saw the mounting tabs out. They won't really be a forging process. They'll be sawn and filed. I hope you found that interesting. I'm sorry we're not going to get the dragon all done today, but it gives you a good reason to come back. So I hope you can give it a thumbs up. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, go ahead and hit that, and that way you'll be able to find the next video easier. In the meantime, I hope you can watch a few of the other videos. Feel free to share the videos with your friends, but then do make time in your day to get out to your shop, work on something, enjoy yourself, challenge yourself with some material or a style of project you've never done before. But stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we'll see you for the next one.